The Great Lakes contain the last major supply of fresh water on the planet. 90% of the United States surface freshwater supply and 20% of the Earth's supply is contained in the Great Lakes. The average person on the street may not realize it, but the Great Lakes are facing a crisis. There's a very real concern that the combination of stresses they are facing could push them beyond a tipping point where we could see massive and potentially irreversible damages to this ecosystem.
Well, beaches are obligated to test their water periodically and also after heavy rains. And we look for fecal contamination. Fecal coliforms is the more scientific term. And the concern is that if the bacteria that is found in the water infected a person's skin, or if they were to swallow it and ingest it, it could cause illness. It's certainly not going to get any better unless we take care of our decaying infrastructure. And that's the part that frightens me, because we're talking about millions and more likely billions and billions of dollars to fix our infrastructure. And we're just not investing the money. We don't have it to invest. So I suspect the infrastructure is just going to get worse and worse and potentially lead to more and more contamination.
An early sign that something is not right with the water. There are severe limitations to eating the fish, especially for children and women under 50.
We look at the concentrations of PBDE, which is polybrominated diphenyl ethers, which are flame retardants, from sediments to several fish species in a food web. And all the fish species that we have collected are contaminated with PBDE. There are several studies now that have shown that PBDEs can affect neurological development, thyroid system, and all other things that can be endocrine disruption, basically.
I think that the community of Burmese in Buffalo has grown to between 3,000 and 4,000 people over the last 5 years, and many of the Burmese subsist on fish as a consistent part of their diet. Remember, you're dealing with people from another culture who wouldn't even have the basic instinct to think about contamination. To them, the water looks clean and the fish look clean, and so they don't understand the idea that there's something that's invisible that's bad for them.
Basically, most of the kids that we deal with and most of the people that we deal with, they mainly fish for food for the most part. Very seldom do we have people that catch fish and release them unless it's fish that's out of season for the most part. But most of the time, it's very important that they know and understand how to clean the fish, how to process it, how to cook it, things of this nature, because I've always believed in the philosophy of something that I was taught years ago, is that if you can bring a person a fish every day and they'll eat, but if you teach them how to fish, they'll eat forever.
It is estimated that 4 billion gallons of a foul cocktail of raw sewage and stormwater overflow into the Buffalo waterways each year.
During heavy rains, the sanitary sewers and the storm sewer waters often mix, and they'll overflow into the sewage treatment plants, which are perhaps not as modern as they should be. And very often that water will spill over into the streams and the rivers without being adequately decontaminated. And then that water then in turn flows into the lakes and can contaminate our beaches.
With over 6,000 documented visitors to Forest Lawn every year, 1,200 families who bring us their loved ones and stay, in addition to the thousands of school groups, students, tourists who come every year to see Forest Lawn. Unfortunately, the Skajakwata Creek is all but peaceful, serene, or emotionally cathartic. It's filthy, dirty, and full of human sewage.
Over the summer, I meet every 2 weeks with my students. They insisted to meet over the summer. I was down at Bailey Peninsula with about 30 South Park students volunteering. And there was another person a teenager in the water. It was after a rainstorm, and like I said before, there's combined sewer overflows there. So this child was literally bathing in human excrement, as well as E. coli, and I was speaking to this person with my 30 students listening, and the kid was just sitting there as though it was bizarre to me. It was bizarre to the 30 students watching this kid sitting in a putrid bathtub, essentially. They kind of laughed at the kid afterwards, and then they kind of felt sorry for him. Tell my students that it's probably as important to keep toxins out of the river, because it's easier to deal with that than trying to clean it up afterwards.
As educators and residents of the city of Buffalo and Western New York, I think it's important for us to really be able to educate our kids about the history of the land uses and the history of the water and the Great Lakes watershed, and really sort of empower them with the knowledge of what's happened before us, and give them the tools to understand how what we do now really affects what it's going to look like years from now.
I'm worried about the future because I would wonder if I'm living in Buffalo in 20 or 30 years, if my kids or I would be able to swim in the waters around Buffalo, or if our drinking water would be safe.
Our waters are sick, and there is something you can do about it.
Most of the people that we come in contact with, we really fish for food. And it's important that the water is clean, and river keepers playing that role in keeping things clean, I think, is the most important thing.
Organization like River Keeper could have a very significant role in educating the people and putting some awareness on about the problems of pharmaceuticals coming from wastewater treatment plants.
River Keepers is the professional. River Keepers is our champion. River Keepers are the only one who have come forward with the professionalism and the commitment to finally and ultimately clean Scajaquada Creek.
Riverkeeper leads Buffalo Niagara's efforts to safeguard our water for present and future generations.